episode 229 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. I'm Solo again, and I am answering your questions. That's right, it's all but your questions today. Are you ready for this? Let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and thanks again for tuning in. It's so great to have you here. And if this is your first time checking out the show, because apparently we got a whack of new listeners lately, welcome to you too. It's great to have you here. And this week is a little bit different for multiple reasons. First off, my apologies. This episode is late. And the reason for that is simple. I was doing some leader self-care last week. I was on holidays. And you know what? Sometimes we just gotta take care of ourselves, right? And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get ahead of the curve like I wanted to with the shows. So I just said, you know what, Scott? No, you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to lead by example to the audience and show them that sometimes it is okay to push things off when it is time for you to take a break and spend it with those you love the most, i.e. my two boys. So that's what I did. So if you're looking for the episode last week and you're just hearing it now, my apologies, but at the same time, I hope you take the lesson from this is that it's okay. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to walk away for a bit. Because at the end of the day, is it going to change my message? No. And in fact, my message is getting stronger to include this part of it. It's okay to take a break because you know what? You feel more rejuvenated. And when I was on my 2-week vacation, that is exactly how I felt. I felt rejuvenated. I didn't look at my emails. I didn't look at my chats. I didn't do a whole lot other than be present with my two boys, spend time with my wife, and do the things that really I enjoy. So first off, thanks for understanding. Second off, I hope you're able to do the same or were able to do the same. All right, so this week we are diving into questions. I posed these questions in our free Facebook group, and that is Leadership Skills for Managers to be Leaders, Not Bosses. Feel free to check it out. The link is in the show notes, and the show notes for this episode, of course, is leaddon'tboss.com/229. All right, so before we really dive into the questions that I'm going to tackle here today, I just want to throw out the disclaimer, right? I'm not going to be able to give you a direct answer, and you're not going to hear a direct answer to a problem that you may or may not have right now. And the reason for that, every situation is different, and without knowing, intimate details of the situation you're going through, which of course I don't get with the Facebook responses, it's okay. But what I am going to do is provide you some strategies for you to look at and look through so that you can then apply these to your situation. Okay? So that is the disclaimer for this show today. And first off the bat, I got a few questions, a few people struggling with work-life balance around their workplaces and staff retention. And what I'm going to say to that is is that we have to understand as leaders is that sometimes there is no balance. And the reality is, I even question right now whether or not work-life balance is a thing. I'm believing, and I am personally starting to go with the ideology, there is no such thing as work-life balance. It is life balance. Work is part of life, and life is part of life, right? If that makes sense to you. So how can we balance things holistically so that our individuals don't get burnt out? And one of the biggest things that cause these burnouts and the imbalance of the balance per se is timelines. Timelines drive everything in your workplace, and you as the leader need to recognize whether or not you're giving your staff enough time to achieve the things that they need to achieve. And if timelines are getting pushed down on you from your superiors, it's your job as the leader to go and advocate for more time to get the things done. There are two limiting factors when we deal with a problem like this. There is time, i.e., either how long it's going to take me to achieve something, or i.e., when it needs to be done. And the second one is resources. How much stuff do I need to have, whether that is people, equipment, money, contracts, whatever. How much of that stuff do we need to have in order to achieve what you want done within the timeline you've set? One of those two things is your limiting factor. That is what's going to drive how you operate. And your job as leaders, advocate for more of that to enable the balance to kind of hit an equilibrium, to enable your staff to basically not feel too stressed out, but rather feel like they're supported and that they have the tools that they need to get the things done that you expect them to do. Now, there are a few other things, of course, which go and disrupt balance, and that is, working outside of hours. And one easy strategy as a leader is to respect the hours of work. We hear about this time in, time out. What defines the workday in this day and age with emails and Slack channels and Telegram messages, so on and so forth? We are ever connected. And the argument is do we ever even leave? Hence why I kind of go with the whole life balance. So you as a leader, you need to be cognizant of this. And it's fine for you if you're working late, or you like to work a bit later on something, or you don't have responsibilities at home. So you need to recognize, though, that's just you. Your team may have children. They may have adults or parents, or grandparents, or maybe they have a spouse that needs to get taken care of, or even a pet, for God's sakes. You know what? They're just as important to many people out there. The moral of the story is that if you're doing work and you need to send messages or you need to do emails, you yourself need to respect those hours of work too. So be mindful of that and do every effort possible to not send those messages outside of those hours, because you're actually going to enact as a catalyst for people to not have work-life balance. If you can set up emails for them to, delay send, i.e. send at 8 a.m. the next morning, do that so that, boom, they're done. They're out of your inbox per se, but in the hopper, ready to go for tomorrow morning, so that when your staff do come in and are ready for work, suddenly the emails from you, which actually were sent the night before, go out, but within a reasonable amount of time. And my final point about work-life balance is to understand the times and have your team understand times when, you're going to be working a little bit longer and during some periods, and other periods you're not. We all go through cycles. We all go through cycles where work is a little bit slower and where work is actually more demanding. So, how do we leverage that? We leverage it by understanding, if possible. Now, I understand this is not possible for every single job or team out there, but what I'd like to do with my team is the summer hours are generally slower. So, you know what? I'm super liberal with them and leaving early, taking a bit longer lunch breaks, cutting out Friday afternoons, maybe around 2 or so. Anyway, moral of the story is this, is that you can go and demand, more out of them during the peak times, but you need to offset it with flexibility during the off-peak times. And that is some strategies for you to really help with that work-life balance. The next problem, I'll call it, that was put out there is from member, I'll call him JC. That's his initials, obviously. JC says, I'm a group leader and the leaders above me are consistently only putting out the fire in front of them. I see the issues coming and make suggestions to preempt them, but they only seem to be concerned with the fire in front of them. So essentially he's looking at how can he get the superiors above him to look long term. And I'll say a couple things here. The first thing is that you have to understand, you as a leader, this is exactly where you need to be, i.e. where JC is actually thinking. He's thinking out long term. He's thinking strategically. He sees things coming before they're there. But instead of, he's wanting to be proactive, but instead he and his team need to be reactive because essentially his superiors are not doing their job. And that's my take on the situation, of course, because they don't have the full details. What I'll say to him is that you can only control what you can control. One, you're doing a great job. Keep up with the suggestions. Keep up with informing people. Like, listen, this is how I see things. This is what I am seeing. We should do actions A, B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever. We need to get proactive. Eventually, I hope, and yes, hope is generally not something that's great, but in this case, we can only control what we can control. So we kind of have to hope that they'll get it, that they will get what's coming down. Now, the second thing is, what I'll say is, do what you can do to preempt it. Do what you can do as a leader to take care of your team. Do what you can do to be preemptive in your lane. And if possible, maybe suggest, not just suggest, but take the initiative, if you're able to preempt some of these things you are seeing coming down the line. If I see a bus coming towards me and I'm walking along the street, well, I'm going to get off the street, right? So if you see it coming, do what you can. But the moral of the story is this. We often get frustrated with our superiors because we think they don't see what we see. They're fighting the fire in front of them. But at the same time, we don't know everything that they're going through. We don't see what they see neither. So there may be things going on that you're unaware that makes you think that they're just fighting the fire in front of them, but the reality is that is where they need to be right now, not necessarily out. But again, that sounds a little bit contradictory to what I said earlier, is that our job as leaders is to think strategically. I understand that. But this is kind of where not having the full situation doesn't quite help me. So kind of taking it cold face value here, kind of giving it, again, every angle, some strategies. So my strategy to you, JC, is 1, worry about what you can control. 2, keep doing what you're doing, man. It is great. 3, take care of what you can take care of. And that is what's going to serve you moving forward. All right, so moving along, going into a fairly lengthy situation here with the next one. So DMD wrote, I would say underperformance, but more to the point, how do you define true underperformance? If you have an intelligent, knowledgeable, long-standing staff member who can wow staff with the thoroughness of her approach, but not understand that the importance of my deadlines, nor bother to meet them. How do I approach that? I've already addressed it with her, asking her what the answer is. She admitted that she gets attracted by something more exciting, so regularly leaves what I asked for behind. She jokes that she probably has ADHD and has a chuckle. She is 60, been with the company for 32 years. I've been with them for 8 months, and I'm an experienced assistant director. I don't think it's appropriate to move into formal performance management. Other than step the tasks out clearly and check in every few days, which seems a bit like nagging. I'm not sure. I just give the quick deadline stuff to the others in our team, which isn't ideal. So the first thing I would say to you is, yes, you're 100% right. You're not in a place where you need to go down the formal route of performance management. I fully agree with you here. And I can feel your pain in that you got someone who is good at their job, who is respectable, who is not out there to harm, is doing their best. But the problem here is that they're not really giving you what you need or want. So again, no solutions, but rather strategies for you here. And you're actually doing one of them right now at the end of your post, is that, give her tasks that align with her strengths. So what are those tasks that she gets attracted to? What is it about those tasks that she goes, ooh, I like that, and drops the ones that you have given her and goes and does those first? If you can figure that out and align her tasks to those things, then you're going to be hitting, all the checks in the box for her right out of the gate. Something she's knowledgeable in, something she's interested in doing, something that you need done, so on and so forth. Now, that being said, if it's always the Gucci tasks, like the really good ones that people look forward to, and the rest of the team are, stuck doing TPS reports, of course that's not ideal. So you have to look at it holistically. So that's something to consider. The other thing to consider is the amount of tasks that you give her. So it seems like there are multiple things going on. Could you limit those? Could you scale them down to just the one thing you need done right now? Some people have a hard time multitasking. And when I say multitasking right now, I mean having more than one task on their plate that they need to get done. Now, I'm not saying working on those tasks in a multitasking format or fashion per se, but rather knowing that I got task A I need to get done, and I have task B that needs to get done. Task A needs to get done by Friday, whereas task B I have 2 weeks. So in her case, it seems like she's getting attracted to task B and getting that done, and then Friday comes around and task A is not done for you. So could you just give her task A and wait until that's done, and then say, hey, here's a new one, and then give her task B? And then finally is, continuously stressing the importance of deadlines with her. Coming from her generation, this shouldn't be a huge issue. So it's a bit surprising to me that you are having this issue with deadlines, because normally people from that generation value deadlines and having things done on the right time. Now, that being said, maybe your predecessor didn't care. Maybe they didn't stress deadlines, and you're still new in this role, right? You said yourself you've only been with this company for 8 months. So maybe it's just that she's not used to this. And it's going to take time for her to understand that you value people meeting deadlines. And if you stress that in more of a public format, talking to everyone and making sure that everyone on your team is aware that this is something that you value, it is going to get to her. As you said, she's intelligent, she's knowledgeable. It seems like she's easy to get along with. So she should be open and understanding to what you value and what you need from her as a team member. So DMD, I hope this helps you. So the final question for this episode comes from MG. And MG throws this out, which is definitely something I hear about quite often. And she asks how to tackle those who have negative attitude in the team, but are very productive as well. This is a complex situation. Like many, but this one is very complex because productive people get looked at with high regard. However, negative people get looked at with low regard. And I would suggest to you that the productivity aspect here overrides the negativity. And we need to get away from that. Now, that being said, my initial recommendation to you is not going to be to have them fired or removed. But we could end up in that way. And I'll get to that in due course. What I'm going to say to you is try to find a way to increase positivity around this person and get that person to talk about things in a more positive light. You're like, okay, Scott, great. How can I do that? And basically is not necessarily really calling them out on their negativity, but asking general questions that will lead to positivity. So if they come to you about a situation, oh, this stinks, we can't do this, there's problems here, etc., look at them and go, well, what's the good out of this situation? Because every situation you see will have a positive aspect to it and a negative aspect to it. And if this person focuses predominantly on the negative aspects to a situation, get them to talk about the positive aspects of that situation and push that on them. And over time, you may get them to turn around. And I say may. Some people, this is just how they are. And you have to accept that they're not going to actually change until they want to change. And that's a big point here. So, moving on. What are the pitfalls of having someone with a poor attitude but is a good performer on your team? And what I'm going to suggest to you is you don't know the cost that is going on in your team right now due to this person's attitude. And what I'd recommend to you right away is just observe. Observe how the rest of the team is responding to this person, how they're operating around this person, how things are going when this person is involved. And if you see a huge drop in individuals' productivity when this negative person is involved with the other team members, then you don't understand the cost of having that person on your team. There are way too many stories of negative high performers drowning teams, crushing teams, nosediving organizations because their attitude takes the rest of the team down and took the organization down with them. On the contrary, there are also a high number of examples of people like that, high performers with negative attitudes who end up getting fired. Why? Because their attitude did not reflect the values of the organization, and more importantly, the cost that person was costing the team was too great in comparison to the productivity that they brought in. Okay, so how to tackle this person? Try to indirectly get them thinking more positively by asking them those generative questions that should spark them to look at the positive side of a situation, not the negative side of a situation. You may even have to have a conversation with them and let them know that they're coming across in a very negative manner, and you need them to start looking at things in a more positive manner. This is a tricky situation, MG. I really do hope, and I would love to hear back from you on how it goes, and I hope it goes well for you, but you do need to traverse this carefully, okay? These negative people have a way of pulling others down with them, and what I suggest to you is that the rest of the team is just as important, if not more important, actually, than this one individual. And that's it for the questions today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, we do have our Leader Growth Mastermind where we talk about these situations on the daily and weekly face-to-face via our video conferencing. And if that's something that's interesting to you, and what is the mastermind? I should answer to you. It is an accountability group that enables you to continuously learn and sharpen your leadership skills so that you can show up to be the best leader for yourself, for your team, and for your organization. So if that is of interest to you, go to leaddon'tboss.com/mastermind and check us out. And if you got questions, just drop me a line. I got no issues answering questions. Again, leaddon'tboss.com/mastermind. And I hope you tune in. I hope you are subscribed to the show. If you're not fully subscribed to the show, do it. Do it now. And you can do it easy at leaddon'tboss.com/subscribe. And that will make sure you don't miss another episode, just like the episode that's going to come out right after this one with former U.S. Navy SEAL Larry Yatch. We're going to be talking about management and being managers, not just leaders. So I hope that piques your interest. Anyway, till next time, remember as always, lead, don't boss. Take care now. And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss. And thanks for coming out. Take care now.